Nothing says true love like an open bar and expensive cheese I paid for while my wife flirts with her boss in front of our anniversary guests. I'm Cedric Fallon, and tonight marks 15 years of marriage to Alma, though watching her laugh at Marlow Trasker's jokes while touching his arm suggests she's been celebrating something else entirely. The living room buzzes with conversation. Our neighbors, the Hendersons, admire the new hardwood floors I installed last month. Alma's sister Jennifer gushes about the catering spread that cost me 2 weeks' salary from my security consulting business. Everyone seems genuinely happy for us, which makes what I'm about to do feel almost cruel. Almost. "Cedric, this house is gorgeous," says Mrs. Peterson from down the street, gesturing with her wine glass toward the bay windows. "You've really outdone yourself with the renovations." "Thanks," I reply, keeping my voice steady while watching Alma whisper something in Marlow's ear. "I put a lot of work into making this place perfect." Marlow Trasker stands 6'2" with silver hair and the kind of confident smile that comes from never facing real consequences. He's Alma's boss at Meridian Insurance, married to Leah for 18 years, and apparently comfortable enough in my home to rest his hand on my wife's lower back. The gesture looks casual to most guests, but I've been watching them for months. I know the difference between professional courtesy and whatever this is. "Where's Leah tonight?" I ask, approaching their little bubble by the fireplace. Marlow's hand drops immediately. "Business trip," she sends her regards. "That's convenient," I say, maintaining eye contact. "Alma mentioned you've been working late together quite often lately." Alma's smile tightens. "The Henderson account requires extra attention. You know how demanding clients can be?" I nod like I believe her, though my phone contains 3 months of GPS tracking data showing her car parked at the Riverside Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday evening. The same hotel where Marlow's company credit card shows regular charges for room service and champagne. The same hotel where I installed a discreet camera in the lobby after befriending the security manager. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alma announces, tapping her wine glass with a fork. "If I could have your attention for a moment." The room quiets. 23 guests turn toward us, phones already emerging to capture the moment. I count them automatically, a habit from my years in military security that serves me well in my current profession. 23 witnesses to whatever happens next. 15 years ago, I married the most wonderful man," Alma begins, her voice carrying that warm tone she uses for presentations at work. "Cedric has given me everything I could ask for: this beautiful home, financial security, unwavering support for my career." I watch her face as she speaks. The practiced expressions, the calculated pauses for effect. She's good at this, making people believe in the performance. It's probably why she's so successful in human resources. People trust her instinctively, never suspecting the careful manipulation underneath. "But tonight," she continues, "I want to be honest about something." My pulse quickens, though I keep my expression neutral. This isn't part of any script I anticipated. Around the room, guests lean forward slightly, sensing drama in the air. "Marriage is complicated," Alma says, glancing at Marlow. "Sometimes you discover that what you thought was love was really just comfort. Sometimes you realize that real passion, real connection, exists with someone else." Jennifer gasps softly. The Hendersons exchange glances. Mrs. Peterson's wine glass freezes halfway to her lips. "Alma," I say quietly, "what are you doing?" She looks at me with something that might be pity. "I'm being honest for the first time in months, Cedric. I'm tired of pretending." Then she walks across the room, grabs Marlow by his expensive tie, and kisses him full on the mouth in front of everyone. The silence that follows feels heavy enough to crush furniture. Someone's phone clatters to the floor. I hear the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the distant hum of traffic outside, the rapid breathing of 23 people witnessing the implosion of my marriage. I don't raise my voice. I don't storm out. I don't throw anything or demand explanations. Instead, I reach into my pocket, remove my wedding ring, and place it carefully on the coffee table. Then I unlock my phone and send a single text message to a contact labeled Insurance Policy. The message reads, "Execute Protocol 7, Authorization Code, Anniversary." Marlow breaks the kiss first, his face flushed with wine and adrenaline. "Alma, maybe we should—" "No more hiding," she interrupts, keeping her arms around his neck. "Everyone deserves to know the truth." I slide my phone back into my pocket and check my watch. 9:47 p.m. The guests stare at me, waiting for the explosion, the dramatic confrontation, the emotional breakdown that would make this evening a story they'll tell for years. "Interesting choice of timing," I say calmly. "Very theatrical." Alma frowns, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Cedric, I know this is difficult." Actually, it's perfect, I interrupt. Really couldn't have planned it better myself. The confusion on her face almost makes me smile. She thought shock would paralyze me, that public humiliation would leave me speechless and defeated. She calculated wrong. My phone buzzes with a confirmation message. I don't check it, but I know what it says. 3 months of preparation, 6 different contingency plans, and dozens of legal documents are now in motion. The text I sent triggered a cascade of automated systems I've been building since the first time I found hotel receipts in her purse. You seem remarkably calm, Marlow observes, his arm now protectively around Alma's waist. I'm a security consultant, I reply. I plan for contingencies. Another buzz from my phone, then another. The guests begin murmuring among themselves, unsure whether to leave or stay for whatever comes next. Jennifer approaches me with obvious concern. Cedric, are you okay? Do you want me to ask everyone to leave? No need, I say. This is just getting interesting. At exactly 10:27 p.m., 40 minutes after the kiss that ended my marriage, someone knocks on the front door. 3 sharp raps, professional and insistent. Every head in the room turns toward the sound. Alma's confidence wavers slightly. Marlow straightens his tie with nervous fingers. Expecting someone? He asks. I walk to the door without answering. Through the peephole, I see exactly what I arranged to see. A woman in a business suit holding a manila envelope, and behind her, a man with a toolbox bearing the logo of Premier Locksmith Services. I open the door wide enough for everyone in the living room to see our visitors. Mr. Fallon? The woman asks. I'm Rebecca Martinez from Hartwell Legal Services. I have documents requiring immediate delivery. Perfect timing, I say, stepping aside. Please come in. The process server enters first, followed by Danny Chen from Premier Locksmith. I've used Danny's services for client installations. He's discreet, professional, and doesn't ask unnecessary questions when you pay in advance. Alma's face goes pale. Cedric, what is this? This, I say, accepting the manila envelope from Rebecca, is what happens when you underestimate someone who makes a living protecting other people's assets. I hand Alma the envelope while Danny sets down his toolbox and begins examining our front door lock. Eviction notice, I explain conversationally. Effective immediately. This house is solely in my name, purchased before our marriage. The joint tenancy agreement you signed included a morality clause that you apparently forgot about. Marlow steps forward. You can't just throw her out. There are laws. There are, I agree. Which is why I spent 3 months documenting everything with licensed investigators, certified timestamps, and legal oversight. Rebecca can explain the details. Rebecca opens her briefcase and produces a thick folder. Mrs. Fallon, you're being served with eviction proceedings based on violation of the cohabitation agreement signed in 2019. You have 30 minutes to collect personal items before the locks are changed. The room erupts in whispers. Phones emerge as guests begin recording the spectacle. Alma snatches the papers from Rebecca's hands, scanning them frantically. This is ridiculous, she says. You can't prove anything. My phone buzzes again. This time I check the message, and I can't suppress a small smile. Actually, I say, I can prove quite a lot. Check your email, Marlow. He fumbles for his phone, and I watch his face change as he reads whatever message just arrived. His confident posture crumbles. What did you send him? Alma demands. Hotel receipts, GPS logs, photographs, and a very interesting recording of him discussing asset transfers with his lawyer last week, I explain. Oh, and Leah isn't on a business trip. She's at her sister's house in Portland, reading through a comprehensive file I had delivered this afternoon. Marlow's phone rings. He stares at the screen like it might explode. That would be your wife, I observe. Might want to take that? Danny finishes installing the new deadbolt and approaches me with the keys. All set, Mr. Fallon. The old keys won't work anymore. Excellent. Thank you, Danny. Alma realizes what's happening and rushes toward the stairs. I need to get my things. 30 minutes, Rebecca reminds her. Personal items only. Jewelry, clothing, toiletries. Nothing jointly purchased, nothing of significant value. I watch my wife of 15 years climb the stairs to pack a bag like a hotel guest checking out. The guests watch me, waiting for some sign of emotion, some crack in my composure. This is insane, Jennifer says. Cedric, maybe you should think about this. I've been thinking about it for months, I reply. Ever since I found the first hotel receipt. Did you know your sister bought lingerie with our joint credit card? Twice. Never wore it at home, though. Jennifer's face flushes red. I didn't know? Of course not. Alma's very good at compartmentalizing. It's what makes her excellent at human resources. She can manage multiple relationships simultaneously without letting them interfere with each other. Marlow finally answers his phone. Leah, I can explain. He stops talking, holds the phone away from his ear, then looks at me with something approaching fear. She wants to talk to you. I'm sure she does, I say. Tell her the lawyer's number is in the packet I sent. Everything else can wait until morning. He ends the call without saying goodbye to his wife. Alma returns downstairs with a hastily packed suitcase and her work laptop bag. Her confident demeanor has completely evaporated, replaced by something desperate and calculating. Cedric, we can work this out, she says. 15 years of marriage doesn't end because of one mistake. One mistake? I interrupt. Alma, I have 3 months of evidence. Hotel visits, restaurant charges, text messages, location data, and recordings of you discussing our finances with Marlow. This wasn't one mistake. This was a sustained campaign of deception. She sets down her suitcase and approaches me with her hands raised in a placating gesture. Okay, yes, I made some poor choices. But this public humiliation, the legal documents, throwing me out of my own home, this is cruel, Cedric. Your home? I ask. Check the deed. Check the mortgage documents. Check the property tax records. This house has been solely mine since the day I bought it. You've been living here as my guest. Rebecca clears her throat. Mrs. Fallon, your 30 minutes are up. I need you to vacate the premises. Where am I supposed to go? Alma asks, looking around the room at our guests. No one meets her eyes. That's not my problem anymore, I say, opening the front door. But I'd suggest calling someone who isn't married. Marlow grabs his coat from the closet. Alma, I'll drive you to a hotel. I wouldn't, I interrupt. Your wife's lawyer is probably watching your credit cards by now. Cash only, if you're smart. The two of them walk toward the door, Alma pulling her suitcase behind her. At the threshold, she turns back. This isn't over, Cedric. Yes, I say calmly. It is. I close the door and turn to face the remaining guests. 21 people stare at me with expressions ranging from shock to admiration to concern. Well, I say, that was unexpected. Anyone want more wine? The party ended 45 minutes after Alma left with Marlow. Though 3 neighbors lingered to ask questions, I politely declined to answer. By midnight, I was alone in my house for the first time in 15 years, standing in the kitchen with a glass of scotch and my phone buzzing with messages I wasn't ready to read. I didn't sleep much. Instead, I sat in my home office reviewing the files I'd compiled over 3 months of investigation. Photos, receipts, GPS logs, audio recordings, and legal documents filled 2 filing cabinets and 3 external hard drives. Evidence of systematic deception that went far beyond simple adultery. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. Pete Morrison, my business partner and closest friend for the past decade. Jesus Christ, Cedric, he said without preamble. Jennifer called my wife at midnight. What the hell happened at your anniversary party? Alma kissed her boss in front of everyone and I evicted her. Silence. Then, that's it? That's your entire summary? She violated the cohabitation agreement. I had legal grounds for immediate eviction. Cohabitation agreement? Pete's voice rose. Since when do married couples have cohabitation agreements? Since I bought this house with inheritance money and wanted to protect my investment. Alma signed it when she moved in. Standard morality clause. Another pause. Cedric, are you okay? I mean really okay, because Jennifer said you were scary calm about the whole thing. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the wall of security certifications and military commendations that defined my professional life. I'm fine, Pete. Better than fine, actually. Want to talk about it? I can come over. I'm good, but I might need some help with something later this week. Whatever you need, Pete said immediately. You know that. After ending the call, I showered, dressed in my best suit, and drove to Meridian Insurance. Alma worked in human resources on the 3rd floor. Marlow's executive office occupied half of the building's top floor. I parked across the street with a clear view of the employee entrance and waited. At 7:43 a.m., Marlow's silver BMW pulled into his reserved parking space. He looked haggard, like he'd spent the night fielding angry phone calls from his wife's attorney. He probably had. Alma arrived 20 minutes later in her red Honda Civic, parking in the general employee lot. She walked quickly toward the building entrance, head down, avoiding eye contact with coworkers. Word travels fast in office environments, especially when it involves executives and human resources managers. I waited until 9 a.m., then called Meridian's main number. Meridian Insurance, how may I help you? I'd like to speak with someone about filing a complaint regarding employee conduct. I'll transfer you to human resources. The irony wasn't lost on me. I held while the system transferred my call to Alma's department. Human resources, this is Patricia. Hi, Patricia. I need to report a potential violation of company policy involving an employee and a supervisor. I see. Can you provide specific details? I have documentation of an inappropriate relationship between an HR manager and an executive, including evidence of company resources being used for personal meetings. Patricia's tone became more formal. Sir, I'll need to take your contact information and schedule a meeting to discuss this matter properly. Of course. My name is Cedric Fallon. I'm a licensed security consultant, and I can provide sworn testimony along with photographic evidence, financial records, and recorded conversations. I heard typing in the background. Mr. Fallon, are you related to Alma Fallon in our HR department? I'm her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband. More typing. I see. Mr. Fallon, given the personal nature of this complaint, I'll need to escalate this to our corporate compliance officer. Can you come in this afternoon at 2 p.m.? I'll be there. After ending the call, I drove home and spent the morning organizing my evidence into presentation folders. Financial documents, photographs, audio files, and witness statements. Everything properly labeled and cross-referenced. By noon, I had assembled a case that would make any corporate lawyer nervous. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Alma. I ignored it and drove back to Meridian Insurance. The corporate compliance officer, Michael Torres, was a serious man in his 50s, with the careful demeanor of someone who'd spent years managing corporate liability issues. He reviewed my evidence for 45 minutes without speaking, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Mr. Fallon, he finally said, this is quite comprehensive. You mentioned recorded conversations? I handed him a digital recorder and a transcript. This recording was made in my home with my wife's knowledge and consent. She was aware of the recording system and had previously authorized its use for security purposes. Torres listened to 3 minutes of Alma and Marlow discussing company client information, travel schedules, and what sounded like plans to use company resources for personal meetings. His expression grew increasingly grim. How long has this been going on? He asked. Based on my investigation, approximately 4 months. The hotel receipts and GPS data suggest regular meetings twice weekly. Torres made more notes. Mr. Fallon, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Corporate policy is very clear about relationships between supervisors and subordinates, particularly when company resources are involved. What happens next? I'll need to conduct internal interviews and review company records. Both employees will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I left Meridian Insurance feeling satisfied with the morning's work. Alma and Marlow would spend the next week answering uncomfortable questions while corporate lawyers calculated potential liability exposure. My phone rang as I reached my car. This time, the caller ID showed Alma's number. Hello, Alma. Cedric, what did you do? Her voice carried a note of panic I'd rarely heard before. I filed a corporate complaint supported by documented evidence. Standard whistleblower procedure. They're suspending me pending investigation. This could ruin my career. That's unfortunate, I said, starting my car. Maybe you should have considered that before violating company policy. This is vindictive and cruel. I made one mistake. Stop saying that, I interrupted. This wasn't one mistake. This was months of calculated deception involving company resources, client information, and systematic violation of your employment agreement. I want to come home. We can work this out. You don't have a home here anymore. The locks are changed and the eviction notice is legally binding. Silence. Then, I'll fight this, Cedric. I'll hire a lawyer and contest the eviction. I'll claim emotional distress and financial abuse. Go ahead, I said calmly. My attorney is Jayla Morrison from Morrison & Associates. She's been reviewing this case for 6 weeks. Every document is bulletproof. I ended the call and drove home, where I found a familiar car in my driveway. Jayla Morrison, Pete's younger sister and one of the sharpest family law attorneys in the state, was sitting on my front porch with a briefcase and a cup of coffee. Afternoon, Cedric, she said, standing as I approached. Pete said you might need some legal advice. Jayla was 34, Harvard-educated, and had built her reputation handling complex divorce cases for high-net-worth clients. She was also one of the few people who knew about my investigation before last night. How bad is it? I asked, unlocking the front door. For you? Not bad at all. For Alma? She smiled grimly. Let's just say she picked the wrong husband to underestimate. We sat in my living room, the same space where Alma had kissed Marlow 18 hours earlier. Jayla opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I've reviewed everything you provided, she said. The cohabitation agreement is airtight. The eviction is legally sound. The evidence of adultery is overwhelming, and the corporate complaint adds a nice layer of professional consequences. What about her threat to contest everything? She can try, but she'd need grounds. Emotional distress requires proof of abusive behavior, which your evidence contradicts. Financial abuse would require proof that you controlled her income or spending, which you didn't. She had full access to joint accounts and made her own financial decisions. Jayla pulled out another document. However, there's something else we need to discuss. The prenuptial agreement. I frowned. We don't have a prenuptial agreement. No, but the cohabitation agreement contains similar provisions. When Alma signed it, she acknowledged that this house and all improvements made to it would remain your separate property. She also agreed that any violations of the morality clause would result in forfeiture of claims to joint assets. What does that mean practically? It means she gets nothing except her personal belongings and whatever was in her individual accounts. The house, the joint savings, the investment portfolio, all of it stays with you. My phone buzzed with another text from Alma. I'm staying at the Riverside Hotel. Room 237. We need to talk face to face. I showed the message to Jayla, who laughed. She's staying at the same hotel where she met Marlow? That's either incredibly bold or incredibly stupid. Probably both, I said. What's my next move? Nothing dramatic. Let her stew for a few days while the corporate investigation proceeds. File for divorce next week. Keep documenting everything and don't engage with her directly unless it's through attorneys. After Jayla left, I spent the evening in my workshop, a converted garage space where I built custom security systems for clients. Working with my hands helped me think, and I had a lot to process. My phone rang at 9 p.m. This time it was Marlow. Cedric, we need to talk. No, we don't. Look, I know you're angry, but this situation is getting out of hand. Alma is talking about lawyers and lawsuits. My wife is threatening divorce. Maybe we can work something out. Work what out, exactly? Some kind of arrangement. Financial compensation for your trouble, a quiet dissolution that doesn't destroy everyone's lives. I set down my soldering iron and gave Marlow my full attention. Are you trying to bribe me? I'm trying to find a reasonable solution to an unreasonable situation. Here's a reasonable solution. Stay away from my wife, keep your mouth shut during the corporate investigation, and hope your own wife doesn't take you for everything you're worth. Cedric, we're done, Marlow. I hung up and returned to my work, but my concentration was broken. Marlow's call suggested desperation, which meant my strategy was working. Corporate investigations moved slowly, but they were thorough. Both he and Alma would face weeks of scrutiny, depositions, and potential disciplinary action. At 11 p.m., my security system chimed with a perimeter alert. Someone was in my driveway. I checked the camera feeds and saw Alma's Honda Civic parked behind my truck. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at the house, apparently working up courage for something. After 10 minutes, she got out and walked to the front door. I watched her through the peephole as she raised her hand to knock, then stopped, then raised it again. Finally, she pressed the doorbell. I didn't answer. She rang again, then knocked loudly. Cedric, I know you're in there. Your truck is here and the lights are on. I remained silent. Please, she called through the door. Just 5 minutes. I'll explain everything. I waited. After another 5 minutes, she walked back to her car and sat there for another 20 minutes before driving away. My phone buzzed with a final text. This isn't over. I turned off the lights and went to bed, knowing she was right. This was just the beginning. 3 days after the anniversary party, I woke to find my truck's windshield covered in red lipstick. Someone had written liar and abuser in large letters across the glass, along with my phone number and the words, ask me about domestic violence. I took photos before cleaning it off, then checked my security cameras. The footage showed Alma arriving at 3 a.m., vandalizing my truck and leaving flyers under my neighbor's windshield wipers. I downloaded the video and added it to my evidence file. By 7 a.m., my phone was ringing with calls from neighbors who'd found the flyers. Mrs. Peterson sounded concerned. Cedric, dear, I got this disturbing flyer about domestic violence. It has your picture on it. I know, Mrs. Peterson. My wife is having some difficulty accepting our separation. The flyer says you threatened her and threw her out without warning. That's not accurate. I have legal documentation of the eviction process if you'd like to review it. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. We've been neighbors for 8 years. I know what kind of man you are. Similar conversations followed throughout the morning. Most neighbors expressed support, but I could hear doubt creeping into some voices. Alma was playing a smart game, using public opinion to pressure me into backing down. At 10 a.m., Pete arrived with coffee and a grim expression. She's posting about you on social media, he said, handing me his phone. Alma's Facebook page featured a long post about surviving emotional abuse and finding the courage to leave a controlling relationship. She'd posted photos of herself looking tearful and vulnerable, along with carefully edited quotes from our conversations that made me sound manipulative and threatening. "How many people have seen this?" I asked. "It's been shared 47 times in the last 6 hours. She's getting a lot of supportive comments from people who don't know the full story." I scrolled through the responses. Friends, co-workers, and acquaintances offering sympathy and advice. Several people suggested she contact domestic violence organizations. A few recommended lawyers who specialized in abusive spouse cases. "She's building a narrative," I observed, positioning herself as the victim before I can establish the facts. "What's your counter move?" I handed Pete his phone back. "Nothing yet. Let her overplay her hand." "Cedric, this could damage your business reputation. Security consulting depends on trust and credibility." "I know, but responding defensively makes me look guilty. Better to let her dig herself deeper while I prepare a comprehensive response." Pete looked skeptical, but didn't argue. We spent the morning reviewing client contracts and project timelines, ensuring my business operations remained stable despite the personal chaos. At noon, Jayla called with an update. "Alma hired Bradley Hoffman from Hoffman & Associates," she said. "He's expensive and aggressive, specializes in high-conflict divorce cases." "What does that mean for us?" "It means she's serious about fighting this. Hoffman will probably file for emergency spousal support, claim temporary rights to the house, and try to freeze your assets while painting you as abusive and controlling." "Can he succeed?" "Not with the evidence we have, but he can make things expensive and time-consuming. Hoffman's strategy is usually to create so much legal chaos that his clients get favorable settlements just to make the process stop." "How do we counter that?" "We file first, and we file hard. Divorce petition, asset protection motions, and a restraining order based on the vandalism and harassment. Beat them to the courthouse with superior documentation." I agreed to let Jayla proceed with the filings. An hour later, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Fallon? This is Detective Sarah Williams with the Metropolitan Police. I'd like to speak with you about a domestic violence complaint filed by your wife." My stomach tightened, but my voice remained steady. "Of course, Detective. When would be convenient?" "Well, this afternoon, if possible. Can you come to the station at 3 p.m.? "I'll be there." I called Jayla immediately. "They're moving faster than I expected," she said. "Don't go to the station alone. I'll meet you there." "What should I expect?" "Standard interview. They'll ask about your relationship, any history of violence or threats, and your side of recent events. Be honest, be calm, and don't volunteer information they don't specifically request." At 3 p.m., I sat in a sterile interview room with Detective Williams, a professional woman in her 40s who seemed genuinely interested in finding the truth rather than simply building a case. Jayla sat beside me, occasionally taking notes. "Mr. Fallon, your wife alleges that you threatened her with physical violence and forced her to leave your home without access to her belongings or financial resources. Can you respond to these allegations?" "They're false," I said simply. "I served her with a legal eviction notice based on violation of a signed agreement. She was given 30 minutes to collect personal belongings, which she did. No threats were made." "Do you have documentation of this eviction process?" Jayla handed Detective Williams a folder containing the cohabitation agreement, eviction notice, and witness statements from the process server and locksmith. "Mrs. Fallon also claims you've been stalking her, tracking her movements, and recording her conversations without consent." "I installed a security system in my home with her written authorization," I replied. "The system includes audio recording capabilities that she knew about and had previously approved. As for tracking, I monitored our jointly owned vehicles using legal GPS systems for security purposes. I provided documentation for all surveillance activities, including Alma's signed authorization forms and the legal basis for vehicle monitoring." Detective Williams reviewed the documents for 20 minutes, asking occasional clarifying questions. Finally, she closed the folder. "Mr. Fallon, based on the evidence you've provided, I don't see grounds for criminal charges. However, I'd recommend avoiding any direct contact with your wife while the divorce proceedings are ongoing." "Understood. Thank you for your thoroughness, Detective." Outside the police station, Jayla looked pleased. "That went better than expected. William seems competent and fair-minded. What's next?" "Hoffman will probably try a different angle. If criminal charges won't stick, he'll focus on civil remedies. Expect emergency court motions within the next few days." That evening, I returned home to find Alma's Honda parked across the street. She sat in the driver's seat, talking on her phone and watching my house. When she saw me, she ended her call and approached. "Cedric, please, just talk to me for 5 minutes." My attorney advised against direct contact. I'm not wearing a wire, she said, raising her hands. I just want to understand why you're doing this. Against my better judgment, I stopped walking toward my front door. Why I'm doing what? Destroying my life, ruining my career, turning our friends against me. I'm not destroying anything, Alma. I'm responding to your choices. One kiss, she said desperately. One moment of poor judgment, and you're acting like I committed some unforgivable crime. Show me your phone, I said suddenly. What? Your phone. Show me your text messages with Marlow. Her face went pale. That's private. Exactly. Because those messages would prove this wasn't one kiss or one moment of poor judgment. They'd show months of planning, dozens of hotel meetings, and detailed discussions about leaving me for him. Alma's composure cracked. You don't understand. My feelings for Marlow developed gradually. It wasn't something I planned. But you did plan it, Alma. You planned the hotel meetings, you planned using company resources, you planned hiding assets and preparing for a divorce that would leave me with nothing while you started a new life with your boss. That's not... She stopped, realizing she'd almost confirmed my accusations. Go home, Alma. Back to your hotel room. This conversation is over. I loved you, she said as I walked toward my door. For 15 years, I really loved you. Past tense, I replied without turning around. That's the first honest thing you've said in months. I went inside and activated my security system, knowing this confrontation was probably recorded by one of us and would likely appear in court documents within days. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. Channel 7 News at 11. You might want to watch. I turned on the television and waited. At 11:15, the local news ran a story about domestic violence awareness, featuring an interview with Alma. She sat in what looked like a victim services office, speaking earnestly about emotional abuse and financial control, while carefully avoiding specific details that could be fact-checked. Many women don't recognize the signs of emotional abuse, she told the interviewer. It starts gradually, with small attempts to control your behavior, monitor your activities, and isolate you from friends and family. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. What advice would you give to other women in similar situations? Document everything. Seek legal advice. Don't let fear keep you trapped in an unhealthy relationship. The irony was staggering. Alma was giving advice about documenting abuse while I sat in my living room surrounded by 3 months of documentation proving her systematic deception. I turned off the television and called Jayla. Did you see the news? I saw it. Hoffman's strategy is becoming clear. He's building a public narrative that will influence potential jurors if this goes to trial. How do we respond? We don't. Not yet. Let her keep talking. The more specific her claims become, the easier they'll be to disprove with evidence. This feels like losing, Jayla. It feels that way, but it's not. Hoffman is making his client the story instead of letting the facts speak for themselves. That's usually a sign of weakness, not strength. I trusted Jayla's judgment, but watching Alma manipulate public opinion while I remained silent felt like a tactical error. She was controlling the narrative, positioning herself as a sympathetic victim while painting me as a dangerous predator. That night, I lay awake thinking about the interview and wondering how many people believed her version of events. My business depended on reputation and trust. If potential clients saw me as an abusive husband, my career could suffer permanent damage. At 2 a.m., my security system chimed again. This time, 3 people stood in my driveway. Alma, a woman I didn't recognize, and a man with a camera. I watched through the security monitors as they approached my front door. The man with the camera positioned himself to capture whatever happened next while the unknown woman knocked loudly. Mr. Fallon, I'm Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. We'd like to ask you some questions about the domestic violence allegations. I didn't respond, but I started recording the encounter through my security system. Mr. Fallon, your wife has made serious accusations about emotional abuse and financial control. Don't you want to tell your side of the story? Alma stepped closer to the door. Cedric, please. Just talk to them for 2 minutes. Tell them I'm lying, if that's what you believe. The reporter tried a different approach. Sir, we're here because we want to be fair to both sides. Your wife gave us her perspective, and we'd like to include your response in our follow-up story. I remained silent, knowing that anything I said could be edited to support whatever narrative they'd already constructed. After 10 minutes, they gave up and left. But I knew this wouldn't be the last media attention. Alma was escalating her campaign, using public pressure to force me into a defensive position. The next morning brought a new challenge. I arrived at my office to find a small group of protesters outside the building. 5 women carrying signs reading Believe Survivors and End Domestic Violence walked in a circle on the public sidewalk. Pete met me at the back entrance. They've been here since 7 a.m., he said. Building security says they have a right to protest on public property as long as they stay peaceful. How did they know where I work? Alma probably told them, or they looked up your business license. I entered through the rear door and spent the morning dealing with concerned phone calls from clients who'd seen the news coverage. Most were supportive, but 2 requested meetings to discuss the situation before proceeding with planned projects. At noon, the protesters were joined by a local television crew. I watched from my office window as they interviewed the demonstration organizer, a woman who spoke passionately about supporting abuse survivors and holding perpetrators accountable. This isn't about one specific case, she told the reporter. This is about creating a culture where women feel safe coming forward without fear of retaliation. The reporter then interviewed one of the protesters who said, "We've all seen how powerful men use their resources to silence and intimidate their victims. We're here to show that the community won't tolerate that behavior." I called Jayla for advice. Can they legally protest outside my business? As long as they stay on public property and remain peaceful, yes, it's protected speech. This is affecting my livelihood. I know, and that's probably the point. Hoffman is using public pressure to force a quick settlement. He wants you to feel like fighting back will only make things worse. What if he's right? Then Alma gets away with adultery, fraud, and defamation, while you lose your business and your reputation. Is that acceptable? No. Then we stick to the plan. File the divorce petition tomorrow, present our evidence methodically, and let the facts speak for themselves. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of remaining passive while Alma controlled the narrative, I would take the offensive, but I would do it my way, with precision and overwhelming evidence. I called Pete into my office and closed the door. "I need you to arrange a meeting," I said. "Channel 7 News, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Tell them I'm ready to give my side of the story." Pete looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Jayla said to avoid media contact. Jayla's advice is sound for normal situations. This isn't normal. Alma is using the media as a weapon, which means I need to use it as a shield. What's your strategy? I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder containing 3 months of evidence. Simple. I'm going to tell the truth. The Channel 7 interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. in my office conference room. I spent the morning organizing evidence into clear, chronological presentations that would be difficult to misinterpret or edit out of context. Financial records, hotel receipts, GPS logs, photographs, and audio files. Everything properly labeled and legally obtained. Pete set up the conference room with professional lighting and arranged for our security cameras to record the entire interview as backup documentation. If Channel 7 decided to edit my responses unfairly, I'd have unedited footage to release online. At 1:30, Rebecca Chen arrived with a cameraman and a producer. She seemed surprised by the professional setup and the volume of documentation I'd prepared. "Mr. Fallon, I appreciate you agreeing to this interview. As I mentioned yesterday, we want to present both sides of this story fairly." "That's exactly what I'm hoping for," I replied, gesturing to the conference table covered with organized evidence folders. "I have extensive documentation to support my statements." Rebecca's producer, a young man named David, looked at the folders with obvious interest. "What kind of documentation?" "Financial records, hotel receipts, GPS tracking logs, photographs, audio recordings, and legal documents. Everything properly obtained and legally admissible." The cameraman finished setting up his equipment and signaled readiness. Rebecca took her seat across from me, notepad in hand. "Let's start with the basic allegations," she said, as the camera began recording. "Your wife claims you were emotionally abusive and controlling throughout your marriage. How do you respond?" "Those allegations are false," I said calmly. "I have 15 years of financial records showing that Alma had complete access to our joint accounts, made independent spending decisions, and maintained her own career without interference from me." I opened the first folder and showed bank statements, credit card records, and investment account summaries. Alma earned her own salary, controlled her own spending, and had equal access to all marital assets. There's no evidence of financial control because none existed. Rebecca examined the documents. "But she claims you monitored her activities and tracked her movements without her knowledge." "That's also false." I opened another folder containing signed authorization forms. "I installed a comprehensive security system in our home with Alma's written consent. She was aware of all monitoring capabilities and had previously requested enhanced security due to break-ins in our neighborhood." I showed the camera Alma's signature on multiple documents authorizing video surveillance, audio recording, and vehicle tracking for security purposes. "These authorizations are dated over a year ago," I continued. "Alma knew about the monitoring systems and had used them herself to check on service workers and delivery personnel when she wasn't home." Rebecca's expression grew more serious as she reviewed the evidence. "Your wife also claims you threatened her with physical violence. Can you address that allegation?" I never threatened Alma with violence of any kind, I said firmly. I have audio recordings of our conversations during the separation period that prove no threats were made. I played a brief audio clip from the night of the anniversary party, clearly showing my calm tone and measured responses during our confrontation. Mr. Fallon, let's talk about the night of your anniversary party. Your wife says you humiliated her publicly and threw her out without warning. The facts tell a different story. I opened the largest folder, containing hotel receipts, GPS logs, and photographs. For 3 months prior to our anniversary, Alma was meeting her supervisor, Marlow Trasker, at the Riverside Hotel twice weekly. These are the receipts from his corporate credit card. I spread out dozens of hotel charges, restaurant bills, and room service receipts. The GPS logs from our jointly owned vehicles show Alma's car at the hotel during these same times. The pattern was consistent every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Rebecca examined the evidence while her cameraman captured close-up shots of the documents. How did you obtain this information? The GPS tracking was authorized by Alma for security purposes. The financial records came from legitimate investigation by a licensed private detective. Everything was obtained legally. I opened another folder containing photographs. These images show Alma and Marlow entering and leaving the hotel together on multiple occasions. They were taken from public property by a licensed investigator. The photographs were clear and professionally shot, showing Alma and Marlow in intimate poses outside the hotel, in restaurant booths, and walking together to his car. Mr. Fallon, even if your wife was having an affair, some people might say your response was disproportionate. My response was proportionate to the violation of our legal agreements, I replied, opening the cohabitation agreement folder. When Alma moved into my house, she signed this document acknowledging that the property would remain my separate asset and that violations of the morality clause would result in immediate eviction. I showed the camera Alma's signature on the agreement, along with the notarization and legal witness signatures. Alma wasn't thrown out without warning. She was legally evicted based on documented violations of a contract she willingly signed. The eviction process followed all legal requirements. Rebecca looked at her producer, who nodded for her to continue. Your wife claims this evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance. Every piece of evidence was obtained legally, I said, opening a final folder containing legal opinions and investigator licenses. I hired Morrison & Associates, a respected family law firm, and Hartwell Investigations, a licensed private investigation company. All surveillance was conducted within legal parameters. I provided documentation showing that every aspect of my investigation had been reviewed and approved by legal counsel before implementation. Mr. Fallon, your wife appeared on our program claiming to be a victim of domestic abuse. Are you saying she's lying? I'm saying the evidence contradicts her claims, I replied carefully. Alma is a skilled communicator who works in human resources. She understands how to present information persuasively. But facts are facts, and I have 3 months of documented evidence supporting my version of events. Rebecca spent another 20 minutes reviewing documents and asking detailed questions about the timeline of events, the legal basis for my actions, and my response to Alma's public statements. Mr. Fallon, what would you say to people who've seen your wife's interviews and believe her allegations? I'd say that anyone can make accusations, but proof requires evidence. I've provided extensive documentation of every claim I've made. If Alma has evidence supporting her allegations, she should present it through proper legal channels, rather than through media campaigns. The interview concluded after 45 minutes. Rebecca and her crew spent another 30 minutes reviewing documents and taking additional photographs of key evidence. Mr. Fallon, Rebecca said as they prepared to leave, this is significantly more documentation than we typically see in these situations. I'm a security consultant, I replied. Documentation and evidence are central to my profession. David, the producer, looked thoughtful. When will this story air? Tomorrow evening at 6 and 11 p.m., Rebecca said. We'll need time to fact-check the documents and get responses from the other parties involved. After they left, Pete and I reviewed the security footage of the interview to ensure we had complete backup documentation. How do you think it went? Pete asked. Better than expected. Rebecca seemed genuinely interested in the evidence rather than just getting dramatic sound bites. What happens when Alma sees this? She'll probably escalate further. But now the evidence is public record. Anyone who wants to fact-check her claims can request copies of the documentation. That evening, I received a call from Jayla. I heard about the interview. Are you sure that was wise? Alma was controlling the narrative with unsubstantiated allegations. I provided documented facts to balance the coverage. What if she retaliates? She's already retaliating. At least now the public has access to evidence instead of just accusations. The next morning brought unexpected support. Mrs. Peterson called to say she'd spoken with other neighbors about the media coverage and the protesters outside my office. "We've known you for 8 years, Cedric. We've seen how you treated Alma, how you maintained your property, how you interacted with the community. The idea that you're some kind of abusive monster is ridiculous." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. That means a lot." "Several of us are planning to write letters to Channel 7 supporting you. We want people to know that your neighbors stand behind you." Similar calls came throughout the day from friends, clients, and professional colleagues who'd heard about the situation and wanted to offer support. At 6 p.m., I watched Channel 7's Evening News with Pete and Jayla in my office conference room. The story led the local news segment with the headline, "Divorce Case Raises Questions About Domestic Violence Claims." Rebecca Chen presented a balanced report that included clips from both interviews, photographs of key evidence, and expert commentary from a family law attorney who wasn't involved in the case. "The documentation provided by Mr. Fallon raises serious questions about the allegations made by his wife," the expert commented. "Financial records, hotel receipts, and GPS logs provide objective evidence that contradicts claims of controlling behavior." The story included Alma's original interview, but balanced it with my documented responses. Most importantly, it showed clear images of hotel receipts, signed agreements, and other evidence that viewers could evaluate for themselves. The 11 p.m. broadcast included additional details and viewer responses. Channel 7 had received dozens of calls and emails supporting my position, including statements from neighbors, clients, and professional colleagues. My phone rang as the broadcast ended. The caller ID showed Alma's number. "You son of a—" she started, then caught herself. "How could you do this to me?" "I presented facts, Alma. The same facts I've been trying to discuss with you for months." "You made me look like a liar on television." "You've made yourself look like a liar by lying on television. I just provided evidence." "This will ruin my reputation, my career, everything." "Your choices ruined your reputation and career. I'm just documenting the consequences." She ended the call without responding, but I knew this wouldn't be her final move. If anything, the television interview would force her to escalate further or abandon her false narrative entirely. The next morning brought a new development. Bradley Hoffman, Alma's attorney, requested an emergency court hearing to address what he called public defamation and harassment by his client's husband. Jayla called with details of the motion. "Hoffman claims your television interview violated court orders about public statements and constituted intentional infliction of emotional distress." "What court orders? We haven't been to court yet." "Exactly. There are no existing court orders restricting your speech. Hoffman is fishing for a judge who might issue a gag order based on the media attention." "Can he succeed?" "Unlikely. You presented documented evidence in response to public allegations made by his client. That's protected speech." The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following afternoon. I spent the morning preparing additional documentation and reviewing legal precedents with Jayla. At 2 p.m., I sat in a courtroom for the first time since this began, facing Alma across the aisle while our attorneys argued about media coverage and public statements. Judge Patricia Martinez listened to both sides with obvious skepticism about the emergency nature of Hoffman's motion. "Mr. Hoffman," she said after reviewing the filings, "your client appeared on television making serious allegations against her husband. He responded with documented evidence contradicting those allegations. What specific court order did he violate?" "Your Honor, Mr. Fallon's media campaign constitutes harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Presenting evidence in response to public accusations is not harassment, Counselor. Do you have legal precedent supporting your position?" Hoffman fumbled through his notes, clearly unprepared for Judge Martinez's direct questions. Jayla stood to respond. "Your Honor, Mr. Fallon exercised his First Amendment right to defend his reputation against false accusations. Every statement he made was supported by documented evidence." Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence folders I'd provided to the court. After 20 minutes, she rendered her decision. "Mr. Hoffman, your motion is denied. Mr. Fallon had every right to respond to public allegations with documented facts. If your client wishes to avoid media attention, she should avoid making public statements about ongoing legal proceedings." Outside the courthouse, Alma approached me while our attorneys discussed scheduling. "This isn't over, Cedric." "Yes, it is, Alma. The evidence is public now. Everyone knows the truth. People will forget the evidence, but they'll remember that you destroyed someone who loved you." "People will remember that actions have consequences," I replied, "something you apparently never learned." She walked away without responding, but I could see the defeat in her posture. The media strategy had backfired, the legal challenges had failed, and public opinion was shifting against her. That evening, I received a call from Michael Torres at Meridian Insurance. Mr. Fallon, I wanted to update you on our internal investigation. Based on the evidence you provided and our own review of company records, we've terminated both employees for violation of company policy. Both of them? Ms. Fallon and Mr. Trasker. The documentation clearly shows misuse of company resources for personal activities. We take these violations very seriously. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Alma's career was over, her reputation was destroyed, and her relationship with Marlow had cost them both their livelihoods. But as I sat in my quiet house that night, surrounded by evidence of my wife's betrayal and the wreckage of our 15-year marriage, I realized that winning this battle hadn't brought the satisfaction I'd expected. Justice had been served, but it felt hollow. Alma was gone. Our life together was over, and I was alone with my victory and my evidence files. Still, as I reviewed the day's events and prepared for whatever came next, I knew I'd made the right choices. Some battles have to be fought, regardless of the cost. The truth had prevailed, and sometimes that's the only victory that matters. 2 weeks after the court hearing, I thought the worst was over. Alma had been quiet since losing her job at Meridian Insurance. Marlow had apparently moved out of his house after his wife filed for divorce. The protesters had stopped coming to my office, and my business was returning to normal. I was wrong. The escalation began on a Tuesday evening in October. I was working late in my home office when my security system detected movement in the backyard. The motion sensors showed 2 figures near my workshop, moving carefully to avoid the main camera angles. I activated the full perimeter system and called Pete. "Someone's trying to break into my workshop," I said quietly, watching the monitors. "Call the police." "Not yet. I want to see what they're after." Through the infrared cameras, I watched Alma and Marlow examine the workshop door. Marlow carried what looked like a crowbar while Alma held a flashlight. They were attempting to force entry without triggering the main house alarms. "They're after something specific," I told Pete over the phone. "This isn't random vandalism." "What's in the workshop that they'd want?" "Client files, security equipment, and my backup evidence drives." I realized their strategy. If they could destroy or steal my evidence, they could claim I'd fabricated everything. Without documentation, the case became he said, she said, and Alma's victim narrative might prevail. I activated the workshop's independent security system, which included motion-activated lights, audio recording, and a silent alarm connected to my phone. Then I called Jayla. "They're attempting to destroy evidence," I explained. "What are my legal options?" "If they're breaking and entering, you can call police. If they actually steal or destroy anything, it becomes a felony. I want to catch them in the act with clear evidence of intent. Be careful, Cedric. Don't do anything that could be construed as entrapment or vigilante justice." I watched the monitors as Marlow finally forced the workshop door open. The motion lights activated immediately, flooding the area with bright illumination. Both intruders froze, temporarily blinded. "This is private property," I announced through the workshop's intercom system. "You're being recorded, and the police have been notified." Instead of fleeing, Alma spoke directly to the camera. "Cedric, we need to talk. Face to face. No lawyers, no recordings, just the 3 of us. Leave now, and I won't press charges." "We're not leaving until you hear what we have to say." Marlow held up a manila envelope. "We have something that might change your perspective on this situation." Against my better judgment, I was curious. I grabbed my phone, activated the recording app, and walked outside to the workshop. Pete stayed on the line, listening to everything. "You have 5 minutes," I said, standing in the workshop doorway. "Then I'm calling the police." Alma looked haggard. Dark circles under her eyes, rumpled clothing, and the desperate expression of someone who'd run out of options. "Cedric, we found something you need to see," she said, taking the envelope from Marlow. "What kind of something?" "Evidence that you've been planning this whole setup for months, maybe years." She pulled out a stack of papers and photographs. Bank records showing you moved money into hidden accounts, emails discussing surveillance equipment purchases, photos of you meeting with private investigators. I examined the documents. They were real, but presented completely out of context. "These prove I hired legitimate professionals and took legal precautions to protect my assets," I said. "Nothing here is improper or illegal." "It proves you were planning to divorce me long before the anniversary party," Alma insisted. "You set me up. You manipulated the situation to make me look guilty while you played the innocent victim." Marlow stepped closer, trying to appear intimidating. "You destroyed our careers based on a setup. That's fraud, conspiracy, and defamation." I looked at both of them, standing in my workshop surrounded by my tools and equipment, trying to rewrite history with selective evidence and desperate accusations. "Let me understand this," I said calmly. "You think I somehow forced you to have an affair, manipulated you into violating company policy, and tricked you into kissing each other at my anniversary party. You created the conditions, Alma said. You monitored my activities, pressured me emotionally, and drove me into Marlow's arms. Then you used that as justification for destroying my life. The rationalization was breathtaking. She'd convinced herself that her choices were my fault, that her betrayal was my manipulation, that her consequences were my cruelty. Alma, I said quietly, you made every choice that led to this moment. I documented your choices. I didn't create them. You're a control freak who couldn't handle losing control of me, she shot back, so you destroyed me rather than let me go. I let you go the night you kissed him. Everything since then has been legal consequences for legal violations. Marlow tried a different approach. Look, we can all agree this situation got out of hand. Maybe we can find a way to resolve this that works for everyone. What kind of resolution? You dropped the corporate complaints, we dropped the domestic violence allegations. A clean slate for everyone. What about the divorce? Alma stepped forward. We could try counseling, work through our problems, start over. I stared at her, amazed by the audacity. You want to reconcile, after everything that's happened? I want my life back, she said desperately. My job, my reputation, my marriage. I'm willing to work for it. Your job is gone because you violated company policy. Your reputation is gone because you lied publicly. Your marriage is gone because you committed adultery. Those are consequences, not punishments. Please, she said, and for the first time in months, she sounded genuinely vulnerable. I made mistakes, I know that, but 15 years of marriage should count for something. I felt a moment of sympathy for the woman I'd once loved, standing in my workshop begging for a second chance she didn't deserve and couldn't appreciate. Alma, I said gently, if you'd come to me 6 months ago and said you were unhappy, we could have worked something out. If you'd asked for a separation or suggested counseling, I would have tried. But you chose deception instead of honesty. You chose betrayal instead of communication. I was scared, she said. Scared of hurting you, scared of losing everything. So instead you chose to take everything while making me look like a fool. Marlow interrupted. This is getting us nowhere. Cedric, what do you want? Money? Public apology? What will it take to end this? I looked at both of them, realizing that they still didn't understand what they'd done or why it mattered. I want you to leave my property, I said finally. I want you to stop contacting me directly. I want you to handle everything through attorneys from now on. And if we don't? Marlow asked, his tone turning threatening. Then I call the police and have you arrested for breaking and entering, attempted theft, and harassment. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Your choice. Leave now, or explain to the police why you're on my property at 11 p.m. trying to break into my workshop. Alma grabbed Marlow's arm. Let's go. This isn't working. They walked toward the gate, but Alma turned back one final time. You'll regret this, Cedric. Someday you'll realize what you lost, and it'll be too late to fix it. I already know what I lost, I replied. A wife who didn't respect me enough to be honest about wanting to leave. After they left, I called the police to report the break-in attempt, then spent an hour documenting everything with photographs and written statements. The recording from my phone captured the entire conversation. Pete arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and moral support. How are you holding up? Better than expected. I think that was their final play. What makes you say that? Desperation. They tried intimidation, manipulation, and negotiation all in one conversation. When none of it worked, they had nothing left. The police arrived at midnight and took statements about the attempted break-in. The responding officer, Sergeant Rodriguez, was professional and thorough. Mr. Fallon, based on your security footage and the evidence of forced entry, we can pursue charges if you want to file a complaint. I want them to stay away from my property, but I don't need them arrested. We'll file a report and contact them about the trespassing. That should discourage future visits. After everyone left, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of scotch, thinking about Alma's final words. She was right that I'd lost something. 15 years of shared history, the comfort of companionship, the future we'd planned together. But I'd gained something too. Self-respect, financial security, and the knowledge that I could defend myself when necessary. The next morning brought a call from Jayla with news that would end everything. Hoffman called this morning. Alma wants to settle. What kind of settlement? Complete capitulation. She'll sign an uncontested divorce agreement accepting your property division, waiving spousal support, and agreeing to a non-disclosure clause about the marriage. What does she want in return? Nothing. She just wants it over. I thought about the offer for exactly 30 seconds. Draw up the papers. Cedric, are you sure? This gives you everything you wanted, but it also means she gets to walk away without admitting fault. She doesn't need to admit fault. The evidence speaks for itself. The divorce papers were signed the following week in Jayla's office. Alma looked tired and defeated, signing each document without reading it carefully. We didn't speak except when required by legal procedure. When it was over, she stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Goodbye, Cedric." "Goodbye, Alma." She walked out of my life as quietly as she'd tried to sneak out months earlier. That evening, I sat in my house now, legally and completely, and realized that the battle was finally over. I'd won everything I'd fought for: the house, the assets, my reputation, and my self-respect. But victory felt different than I'd expected. Not triumphant or satisfying, just quiet and final. I called Pete to share the news. "It's done," I said. She signed everything. "How do you feel?" "Relieved and tired." "Want to grab dinner, celebrate your freedom?" "Maybe tomorrow. Tonight I just want to sit in my house and remember what peace feels like." After ending the call, I walked through the rooms Alma and I had shared for 15 years. The living room where she'd kissed Marlow, the kitchen where we'd planned our future, the bedroom where I'd first suspected her betrayal. All of it was mine now, but it felt different. Not better or worse, just different. I poured another scotch and sat on my back porch, looking at the workshop where everything had finally ended. The security lights cast long shadows across the yard, and I could hear the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Tomorrow I would start the next chapter of my life. I would rebuild my business, reconnect with friends, and figure out what happiness looked like as a single man in his 40s. But tonight, I would sit quietly in my house and appreciate the simple fact that the truth had prevailed, justice had been served, and I was finally free to move forward. The anniversary kiss that had ended my marriage had also ended my illusions about love, trust, and loyalty. Some lessons are expensive, but they're worth learning. I raised my glass to the empty yard and said quietly, "Happy anniversary." Then I went inside, locked the door, and set the alarm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was mine alone. The war was over, and I had won.